So The Power, which is on Shudder, you remember a couple of weeks ago I reviewed Violation, which was on Shudder. They got some really good stuff. So The Power, which is written and directed by Karina Faith, this is a kind of an eerie chiller set in the early 70s during the power strikes. You know, when power cuts were the order of the day. And Rose Williams is Val, who is a new arrival nurse at an East London hospital. She seems very naive. She's come from a children's home where we hear that, you know, it could be very brutal life there. She clearly has dark secrets hidden in her past. She flinches whenever she's asked a probing question. She wants to work, you know, pediatrics and kids and babies. She meets a little girl very early on who seems to apparently keep, you know, nobody can keep track of her. And then she meets a nurse, Babs, who she knew before and who seems to have bullied her. And then she meets a maintenance man, played by Theo Briggs, who's kind of impressively leering. And she gets on the wrong side of the matron, who immediately condemns her to doing the one thing which she doesn't want to do, which is to be working in the hospital in the dark when the lights go off. Here's a clip.
The only ward left here tonight is antenatal and intensive care. Generators will power them. You will be on intensive care. Stay on the ward unless essential. It'll be very dark.
That's it from me. I'll be back with the power at 7 a.m. Take good care tonight. Stay safe and stay near that candle.
That's too early. Isn't that too early?
Now, I should say that you heard there the voice of a DJ, which will be familiar if you're a regular listener to this show. We have previously invited on air Joe Haddo, who works on the technical side of the thing, and was brought in at great expense to provide the voice
He was the
of
voice,
that.
wasn't he?
He was the voice. He was the voice. So you know, a full, you know, cards on the table. There is a connection through that. Although I have to say, it's a very small connection, and it actually in no way affected my view of the film, which is that this is a really interesting film. When I first left school and I didn't get into any I did a UCAS form or UCA form or whatever they're called now. You know, I applied to 5 universities, got rejected from all 5. I ended up working in the London Hospital in Whitechapel, which I loved. I really fell in love with it, and in fact, you know, when I finally got an offer to go to Manchester, I kind of thought, well, I actually really like it here. What this film captures is there is a splendid creepiness to that idea of, you know, of hospitals and hospital corridors. I got in touch with the director and said, where was it shot? She said, Goodmayes Hospital, which is an old Victorian psychiatric building, and also Blythe House for the staircases between the floors. What they managed to do is to take that location and turn it into the kind of classic haunted house with layers. You go up, you go down and down. This, you know, bad stuff in the basement, and the floors seem to be kind of weirdly interchangeable. It does that thing that Stephen King writes about in Dance Macabre, which is a book that I know you like very much, in which he talks about literature and films that evoke the bad place. You know, the kind of, it's whether it's the haunting or Haunting of Hill House, or whether it's The Shining, whatever it is, that idea of the bad place. In fact, there is a Stephen King joke in the film that somebody is reading an early copy of Carrie. It's beautifully shot by Laura Bellingham, who really makes these corridors look like they go on forever, but also evokes that idea that they're circling, that somehow you're in a labyrinth, or I always get it wrong. Is it a labyrinth? You're in you're in something that just leads you round and round, like the you know, that Escher drawing of the stairs that kind of all lead to themselves. Great soundtrack by Elizabeth Bernholtz and Max Wardener. As I said, you know, that cameo by Joe, but the thing that it gets right is, you know, every now and then I started thinking about things like, okay, that reminds me a little bit of Saint Maud, and that reminds me a little bit of The Haunting. But the thing it gets right is that it has its own atmosphere, and it is a really smart idea setting it in this time period, which we all remember, and you and I certainly remember, of the power cuts and the power going off. And I like the kind of that double on that thing about, it's called The Power, but what's the power referring to? So yeah, it is a really solidly haunting, you know, well made atmospheric movie with a great soundtrack. and a couple of really interesting ideas. But it's a haunted house or haunted hospital film, and the thing that has to get right is it has to give you the sense of being in that building, and it does. It absolutely puts you in that building, and I think that's the key to why it worked so well for me.